Welcome to the dissection of the neck muscles of the kitty cat. You are going to have to skin a little bit more today because you will have to skin the cheek area in order to see the masseter muscle. And also, just a warning, this is going to be a high mangle area as it may already be mangled from the incision. As you can see, this one has kind of like a big red blowout already from where they injected the latex dye. So just a warning, this could be a high already mangled area, and it's also very easily mangled by students as well. So I'm going to start with the masseter muscle, which is just underneath the skin here in the cheek area. This is going to be the major chewing muscle. So I'm going to come in here and kind of skin the cheek. I'm going to try to get close to the corner of the mouth here and skin this whole big area of the cheek all the way up to the base of the ear. Eventually, when we get to the internal organs and look at some of the glands, like salivary glands, we're going to look at the parotid gland, which will be at the base of the ear. Now, since we are going to look at those glands, you do want to kind of be careful while you are taking the skin off of the cheek area here, because the parotid gland will also have a very thin, skinny duct that's going to take the saliva from the gland to the mouth, and that will run on top of the masseter muscle. So you don't want to cut that. If you do, you do have two cheeks, so it's not the end of the world. And if you can find it and realize what it is and end up cutting it anyway, at least you'll have an idea of what you're looking for on the other side. Now, it can be a little bit tough in the cheek area here, and it is also pretty thick. The whiskers do tend to get in the way a little bit as well, so some of those might get cut off. I promise you, he or she does not need them. All right, so now we've got a decent section cut away here. I'm actually going to try to cut a little bit more. Just to make it all the way to the base of the ear. That'll make it a little bit easier later. All right, so right now you can't really see much except for some connective tissue on the surface there. So I'm just going to try to get in here a little bit more, remove some more of the surface tissue to get to the actual masseter muscle underneath here. I also do not have the sharpest of scalpels at the moment. Hopefully you can somewhat see the masseter muscle coming out here in the cheek area. Another thing that helps is this is the only muscle that you need to know in the cheek. So if there is anything pointing to the cheek, automatically go masseter. Now, it's probably hard to see on your computers watching this video, but there's a really thin duct right here. And that is the parotid duct. That's going to go back to that parotid gland at the base of the ear. So that's what I'm trying not to cut there. Again, if you do, it's not the end of the world. You do have two sides. I may end up cutting mine on purpose just to give you a better view of the actual muscle. As you can see, I am going layer by layer just to be careful not to get anything else. But this big bulge right here, you can definitely see kind of the bottom border to it. So there's, get my pointer here. So right there, that nice big round bulge, that is the masseter muscle. Okay, so next you're going to move to the underside. Okay, and you may have to remove a little bit more skin here as well. You're going to have to go up to the chin area. And as you start removing some of that tissue up underneath the chin, you should start to see this V forming up here. And that V is your digastric muscle. Di means two, so this is another bilateral muscle. You have one strap going on each side. That's the digastric. And then in the center of that digastric, it should be above this blue vein right here, which is actually called the transverse jugular. This is the mylohyoid. So digastric, mylohyoid. Now the rest of the muscles are going to be underneath that transverse jugular. They're going to be on this bottom side here, kind of working our way inferior a little bit. On the surface here, now this is where it gets a little bit mangled. The surface muscle that you're seeing here is called the sternomastoid. Most of these neck muscles are named for their attachments. So the sternomastoid is going to be attached at the sternum and go up to the mastoid process, which is at the base of the ear. Now you're going to have to actually move that sternomastoid out of the way. And that should open up to allow you to see the sternohyoid. This is also a bilateral muscle, so right here's the midline. So this would be one sternohyoid, and that would be the other sternohyoid on the other side. Now this goes from the sternum to the hyoid bone, sternohyoid. On the lateral side, on either lateral side of the sternohyoid, you should see a very small, thin muscle called the sternothyroid. That's going to go from the sternum to the thyroid cartilage of your larynx or voice box. And that again is going to be very thin, small on the lateral side of the sternohyoid. Lastly, you're going to try to find the cleidomastoid, which is going to go from the clavicle to the mastoid process. Now for this one, you're going to have to go in lateral to the jugular here. You should be able to see that external jugular. You can see that nice big thick blue vein here. That's the jugular vein. You do not want to cut that. We are eventually going to look at some of these blood vessels. So if you do see it, do not cut it. Now you're going to find that jugular and you're going to try to free that up a little bit so that we're not cutting that. And I'm just kind of freeing that so that I can see some of the area and muscles around it. Now you can see on this particular cat, there is an incision lateral to that jugular. Now in that incision here, you can see the muscle running right here, which is that cleidomastoid. It's going to run from the clavicle up to that mastoid process at the base of the ear. Okay, so these neck muscles, even though they can get mutilated, they're a little bit easier to learn where they're located because they have attachment points in their name. So first off, you have the masseter, which is the only one in the cheek. Then in the actual neck area, underneath the chin, you have that digastric muscle that creates the V, the mylohyoid in the center. Below the hyoid bone, you have the more superficial sternomastoid, which is going to go from the sternum up to that mastoid process. Under that, moving that to the side a little bit, that should open up for you to see that sternohyoid, sternum to hyoid bone. That should be one of the easier ones to see out of all of them. Then on the lateral sides, you'll have the sternothyroid. And then moving over lateral to that jugular, open up a space there so you can see that cleidomastoid that's going to run from the clavicle up to the mastoid process.